Hi, I'm Aditya,
And I'm Adarsh.
and this is your slice of sports from the Mont Moments.
Welcome back, everybody. This is episode 3 of Mont Moments. Hope you're having a great weekend. And we're going to jump right in with game 6 of the NBA Finals, which happened on Thursday with the Indiana Pacers blowing out the Oklahoma City Thunder 108 to 91 to tie the series at 3 apiece and set up a huge game 7, the first NBA Finals game 7 since 2016. The Pacers, this game was not very close. From the moment the first quarter ended, Indiana took complete control with a 36 to 17 advantage in the second quarter. They took a 22-point lead into halftime. So, I mean, Indiana just played this game incredibly well.
Yeah, I mean, this was obviously first quarter was pretty close. It was a three-point game, and then second quarter on, I mean, Indiana outscored OKC 36 to 17 in the second, 26 to 18 in the third, and by then it was over. Obviously, fourth quarter didn't really matter. But yeah, I mean, this was just a fantastic offensive and defensive showing for the Pacers. We can start off with the Pacers first. Um, I was surprised. Obviously, like we've seen how good their offense is, but I was honestly really surprised by how good their defense was. Like, if you have Tyrese Halliburton going out and getting plucks, getting steals, like clamping up big role players, like you're probably not gonna lose that game. If Halliburton's playing that good of defense, that means the role players are also playing really good defense. Pascal Siakam, Miles Turner, Aaron Nesmith, Nemhard, all of them were just out there being fantastic. Siakam was really aggressive and disciplined. I think we can talk about this a bit later, but maybe looking at his finals MVP, we can talk about this a bit later though. I saw it was a massive team effort for the Pacers. All of their starters besides Turner were in double digits, and six players in total were in double digits. I mean, if you have that sort of team effort, you're probably not going to lose. There was a big turnover discrepancy, offensive rebounding discrepancy, steal discrepancy. One thing I saw with Mathurin, he was still kind of stinky from last game as well. But I mean, I guess it just didn't matter because yeah, guys like Nemhard shooting 71.4% from the field, 60% from three, and 97% true shooting. I mean, that guy was clamping up Shea and shooting that efficient. Like, you're probably not going to lose with that. Halliburton was hitting big threes and getting major steals. Obi Toppin was very good again. And then they hit those two buzzer beaters at the end of the second quarter and the third quarter. I mean, it's all about momentum, right? Like that was a fantastic game. And just the Pacers they were just firing on all cylinders, looking really fantastic.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, Andrew Nembhard kind of got them started. It was a slow start for the Pacers. I believe Oklahoma City jumped out to a 10-2 lead, but
Mhm.
Nembhard hit three straight shots, one on his own personal 8-0 run in the first quarter, and that got them going. Um, Halliburton, you talked about his defense. He was extremely aggressive
Mhm.
defensively, going for steals, getting big deflections, leading to transition opportunities. Pascal Siakam made big plays again. In my opinion, he had the best finals dunk that we've seen since Giannis
Yeah.
in 2021.
Mhm.
Um, Posterizing Jalen Williams to end the first half. I want to talk about Aaron Nesmith real quick. He only had 8 points in this game. Excuse me, 10 points in this game, 2 of 6 from three, but it just felt like those two threes and that floater shot he hit, they were just
Mhm.
huge momentum shots because they came in transition off a turnover, and it just felt like it deflated Oklahoma City and got the crowd going.
Mhm.
Um, Obviously, TJ McConnell, we could talk about him all series long. In our little mini episode that I put out, I didn't put him in my top 5 for Finals MVP. I think I've got to do that after six games. He's been one of the best players on the court
Uh,
this entire series. Had 12 points, 9 rebounds, 6 assists, 4 steals in 24 minutes. Um, it's no longer just a cute story. This guy is legitimately sometimes the best player on the floor when he's out
mhm.
there. So, and the last point I want to make about Indiana is they didn't actually shoot that much better than the Thunder
Yeah.
did.
Mhm.
Indiana shot 41.3% from the field. Oklahoma City shot 41.9%. Effective field goal percentage 47% for Oklahoma City, 49.5% for Indiana. But Indiana took 18 more shots in this game, 92 to 74, and they were plus 21 from the three-point line, where they shot 35.7%. Oklahoma City shot under 30%. So the three-pointers and the turnovers for Oklahoma City really did them in.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was a big thing. And like I mentioned, turnover discrepancy. You had OKC with 21 and the Pacers with 10. OKC only got four offensive rebounds, while Indiana got 11. And the biggest thing for me, the steal discrepancy. OKC got 4 and Pacers at 16. I mean, OKC is supposed to be the number one defense, but I mean, obviously steals are not the only thing that's part of defense, but if you have the sort of mismatch, like OKC has big rebounding guys. Hartenstein, they specifically signed to get that size and the ability to get those offensive and defensive rebounds. Chat, although he's on like the slimmer size, he's still like 7 feet tall. Like he should be able to get those rebounds. But we saw TJ McConnell rip a rebound away from Chet Holmgren. At that point, TJ McConnell has that fire and you need to combat that. Even if you're 7 foot and you think, oh, I should easily be able to get this rebound from a guy who's like, 6'2", 6'3". Like, if you can't do that, like, why are you even on the floor, right? You still gotta put
Yep.
all of your like, even if you're one game away from winning, you still gotta put it all. One interesting stat I saw, both Chet and Miles Turner are both shooting less than like 40%, and both of that is the least ever since Patrick Ewing against Hakeem. So both of these big men on both sides of the ball are not really having a good time in the series, but obviously the Pacers role players are really showing out their wings, their defense, like Shea is obviously getting to a spot and hitting those, getting those points and stuff like that. But they're still like hounding him defensively. And once they get their offense going, like there's nothing you can really do. But I think now we can move on to OKC. I know you had a lot of major points about them.
Oh yeah, I've got a lot of things to say about Oklahoma City because they're making me look bad. My mini episode, I said they're going to win this game, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is going to be the Finals MVP, and that made me look very stupid because Indiana completely controlled this game. So the first thing I want to talk about is SGA and Jalen Williams. It felt like when they came out in this game, they were very aggressive, too aggressive, dribbling into double teams and triple teams, getting tunnel vision, going to the rim, making bad decisions. SGA had 3 turnovers in the first quarter. He ended up with 8 turnovers. He only played 3 quarters in this game. He had extreme tunnel vision, wasn't letting the game come to him. He was trying to go grab the game right away. And that was bad for not only him with the turnovers, but the rest of his team didn't let anybody else get into a rhythm. Jalen Williams, minus 40 through three
Wow.
quarters, minus 40 in a 17-point loss. You
I
can do
think
the math.
I think that's the worst plus and minus in finals history if I saw that stat correctly. That's
Yeah,
insane.
I would not be surprised if that's true. Yeah. And it wasn't just him who had a terrible plus minus, of course. Alex Caruso was minus 33. Lou Dort was minus 28. But Jalen Williams was the star of game 5. He played extremely badly in this game.
Mhm.
The box score will not do justice to how bad he played. I didn't think he was as bad as SGA, but still not very good. About Chet Holmgren, terrible game again. 4 points, 2 of 9 shooting. Um, I mean, he's just all series long. He's been extremely soft driving to the paint. His 3-point shot has been really slow on the release, and he's had a lot of those shots blocked. And in this game, he started missing open shots at the rim too. It looks like he's kind of in his head a bit. Maybe the moment's getting a little bit big for him, but they need him to be Chet Holmgren that we saw down the stretch of the regular season if they're going to be able to protect the rim in Game 7. Didn't feel like Aaron Wiggins or Cason Wallace were ready for this moment either. I highlighted them as kind of the key X factors in this game, and they did not show up at all. Um, Oklahoma City did not have any defensive intensity in this game, and it was made even worse by their live ball turnovers that allowed transition opportunities for Indiana. Um, according to Basketball Reference, they have a metric called game score, which basically just says how well you played in the game. The best player for Oklahoma City in this game was Isaiah Hartenstein, who played
Wow.
16 minutes, had 10 points, 4 rebounds, 1 assist, 1 steal, 1 block.
Mhm.
His game score was 12. 5 players on the Pacers had a game score of at least 12.
Mhm.
Siakam, Andrew Nemhard, Halliburton, Obi Toppin, and TJ McConnell. In fact, the top 3 players by game score for Oklahoma City were Hartenstein, Isaiah Joe, and Jalen Williams.
Mhm.
Not Jalen Williams, the all-star, but the backup big man Jalen Williams, who only
Yeah.
played in the fourth quarter in garbage time. So, disgraceful performance from Oklahoma City is that's really. I mean, I could keep ranting, but that's all I have to say for now. It was a horrible performance, and yeah, they didn't look ready for this game at all. And I put that on Mark Dagnall.
Yeah, I definitely think transition wise, that was probably like their biggest mistake. The Pacers are a very good transition team. You have, Tyrese Halliburton, probably like the best ball handler in the league right now, and then you have multiple lob threats, right? You have Obi Toppin, you have Pascal Siakam, you have Miles Turner. When they get into transition, it's extremely hard to stop them, especially like, even though OKC is the number one defense, when you have so many guys just running down the court, just barreling straight at the rim, it's hard to stop them. So the turnovers combined with the steals, combined with the fast break efficiency of the Pacers, like, yeah, this is just a bad performance by the Thunder. Obviously, like, they only ended up losing by 17, but I mean, that was in garbage time, right? When everyone pulled their starters and you have guys like, you know, uh, Ben Shepherd out there and just like, shooting up the ball, just having a fun time.
Yep.
But yeah, I just think that OKC, this was not their best performance. SGA, like, to win the finals, right? You need to have a guy who in the last 5 minutes, you can just give the ball to him and tell him to go, right? You have your Steph Curry's, your LeBron James, right? Who you can just put the ball in their hands and say, go and try to score and just help us win this game. In this situation, SGA did not look like that guy. Like he was obviously a very good player, sometimes hitting his shots, but you got to take over the game if you're going to be an MVP like he is.
Yep, absolutely. And it looked like to me that he tried to take it over way too early,
Mhm.
being too aggressive, not letting the game come to him, and that, I mean, sometimes you hear superstars not being aggressive enough, but this was the exact opposite. Um, so let's talk a little bit about the keys to Game 7. What does Oklahoma City have to do to turn around? What does Indiana have to do to pull off this upset? The first thing I want to talk about is how deep does Mark Daigneault go into his bench in this game?
Mhm.
Usually he plays around a 9 to 10 man rotation in regular time. With you got your starting five: SGA, Williams, Holmgren, Dort, Hartenstein. Then you got key reserves like Alex Caruso, Aaron Wiggins, Cason Wallace, Isaiah Joe, maybe some Kenrich Williams. So do we see just the starting five and maybe Caruso and Wiggins or Wallace? Does he go 7 deep, 6 deep? How long does SGA play in this game? Because I mean it's game 7, and if it's game 7 of the finals, I would expect my superstar to play at least 45 minutes. Um, but we have seen SGA kind of get tired towards the end of some of these games, and they've changed his rotation patterns that he's got more energy at the end. So I'll be interested to see the rotations for OKC, as well as if Chet Holmgren has his minutes dialed back a little bit.
Mhm.
He's very important to the team winning when he's at his best, but he has a 93.0 offensive rating this series, which is the worst on the team.
Yeah.
Um, Again, you talked about his shooting struggles, under 40% from the field. I believe he's shooting 2 of 17 from three in this series.
Wow.
Um, and Miles Turner as well is shooting 5 of 25 from three. Those two guys are going to be, their offense is going to be key. If one of them has a big game offensively, I would pick that team to win. And the final thing I just want to say is the turnover battle between Halliburton, Nembhard, and McConnell, the three main ball handlers for Indiana versus SGA and J-Dub. I think this is going to say a lot about how well these offenses perform. If the Thunder are turning the ball over, Indiana's going to run the ball in transition down their throat. If the Thunder are getting turnovers, that probably means that they're getting some easier shots, not having to go in the half court where their offense has been surprisingly inadequate in this series.
Mhm.
So yeah, the turnover battle is also something I'll be watching a lot. So what other keys were you looking at for Game 7?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like we haven't really seen like a magnet ball game from either one of these teams in terms of like one player just not missing at all, right? You have like you don't have like a Clay-esque performance where he couldn't miss. I think I mean it's questionable whether that's gonna happen. Both of these teams are very good, but like I wouldn't be surprised if someone on the Pacers just decides to go ballistic, right? Like if Pascal Siakam just decides to drop 35, 40 points, I wouldn't be surprised at all. On the other hand, like Shea has been, like somewhat consistent in terms of like not really like blowing up and scoring a bunch of points. But yeah, like last game he had 8 turnovers. If he can shave that down to just, two or three, that probably gives OKC a much better chance to win. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think this game is going to be close once again. I don't think it's going to be a blowout. I think game 7 is a time where you just, there's no more games after this, right? You have an entire summer to rest. You should be playing your players as many minutes as needed to win this game. So I think both of these teams, play a 6, 7 man rotation as they should. If I've learned anything from 2K, it's you show me your rotation in game 7 and you just tell your players all to play. I think in this situation, like even if they get tired and they get maybe a little banged up and stuff, you have the rest of the summer to rest and recuperate. now is the time to just put everything in. And I think, I mean, just looking at their starting fives, right? Who do you think has a better starting five, if or starting five or six or seven in terms of like just who can just win this game? What do you think?
Hmm. That's a really tough question to answer because, I mean, in a vacuum, I would say Oklahoma City, but it
Mhm.
feels like this series, I've been more impressed by the Pacers starting lineup. Their chemistry, the way they
Yeah.
move the ball, how they run in transition. They've been on a string defensively as well. Big shout out to Nemhard and Neesmith for their work defensively. Um, yeah, but then at the same time, Indiana's bench has been better too. So
Yeah, I think
uh,
Pacers might actually like stay with their bench with how efficient and good they've been, right? Like, I don't think you can bench TJ McConnell, right?
of course, no,
Given how good he is, obviously Obi Toppin is playing very well, so you got to have those two guys in your rotation. But then where do you go? Do you play Ben Mathurin, given how bad he's been in the last two games? Ben Shepherd, I mean, he's a good piece, but you probably don't play him, so. I'd look at Indiana probably playing seven or eight then throughout this game, but I think OKC will definitely shave it off six or seven. Is the farthest I can go. Obviously, the Pacers' strength is their depth, and you shouldn't go away from your strengths at the end of the game, or at the end of the series rather. Uh, but yeah, I definitely think that Indiana might be able to just come out on top of this just because of their depth and just because of the chemistry, like you mentioned.
yep. And I think I agree with you. Probably going to see seven people for Indiana, maybe eight. Um, Obviously, their starting lineup, and then TJ McConnell and Obi Toppin off the bench.
Mhm.
But maybe we see Ben Mathurin in the first half, and then if he plays well, he gets a stint in the second half. If not, then he doesn't.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, last word on this series, I was impressed with how Tyrese Halliburton was moving out there. I was pretty concerned about his calf injury, but
Mhm.
he didn't look any worse for wear. Hitting deep threes, step back threes, making those big defensive plays. He was impressive in game six, as was the rest of the Pacers team.
Yeah,
So,
my
yeah.
question for you, I mean, we can talk about this on both sides depending on who wins. Who do you think wins Finals MVP for both teams?
Okay. If the Thunder win, I feel like it's going to be Shai Gilgeous-Alexander.
Mhm.
Uh, I don't think there's much of a discussion there, although Williams has been good as well. For the Pacers, that's the real question, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
you could make an argument that like four guys have been the most impactful player. Halliburton's the biggest star. Siakam's been the most productive. McConnell's had the biggest impact, in my opinion. I would probably say I would pick TJ McConnell to win it, which is crazy.
Okay.
Um, he's only playing 19 minutes a game,
Uh,
but his impact has been like every game. You feel his impact out there.
yeah.
But realistically, I think I would take Pascal Siakam. He's been kind of their leader in this series. The younger guys have deferred to him with his finals experience. He's their leading scorer, leading rebounder, and he just looked like he's been in control all series. So yeah, probably Siakam. Although it would be so cool to see TJ McConnell win it. Playing off the bench the entire series. He deserves it more than Andre Iguodala did in 2015. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, I definitely think this game seven is like it's questionable for the Pacers right now. Like if Halliburton or Pascal Siakam or somehow, Andrew Nembhard drops 50, who knows if he might win it, right? I think OKC is definitely it's gonna be Shea. Like if they win this game, it's gonna be because of Shea. But yeah, like you said, I mean, right now it's probably gonna be Siakam just because of how you know, consistent he's been. But yeah, this game seven could definitely make a difference. And yeah, that's all I had for this. I mean, both game six was fantastic, and game seven is hopefully going to be a pretty close game and a pretty competitive game. I think this is definitely one of the better series, in my opinion, probably the best series we've had since. I'm going to be a bit biased, 2022 with the Warriors, of course, but in reality, probably 2021 with the Bucks and the Suns.
Yeah, it's been a really fun series. This should be a hopefully a classic game seven. Like I said, the first game seven since 2016, which kind of surprised me, but
Mhm.
that's I guess the finals have just been uh, not that competitive in recent years.
Yeah.
But we're gonna go ahead and switch gears, talk a bit about some of the trades that are going on in the NBA. Two teams are playing in the finals, but 28 teams are in the offseason right now.
Mhm.
So the biggest news that's happened since our last episode was Desmond Bain, Grizzlies guard, traded to the Orlando Magic. Kind of a surprise deal. We weren't really expecting Bain to be on the trade block, but Orlando forked over Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Cole Anthony, four unprotected first-round picks, and a first-round pick swap.
Mhm.
Those picks are the 16th pick in this year's draft, um, Orlando's 2028 and 2030 unprotected first rounders. And the juiciest pick is a 2026 first rounder that is the least favorable of either Phoenix's or Washington's. Very, very high chance that both of those picks are in the lottery. So,
Mhm.
um, yeah, great draft haul for Memphis. Also, the top two protected first round swap in 2029. For Orlando, kind of a desperate move is what the
Mhm.
way I see it. I mean, Bane, four first round picks doesn't really add up, but then you consider the fact that Orlando was by far the worst 3-point shooting team in the league last year,
Yeah.
just 31.8% on catch and shoot threes. That's Bane's specialty. He's going to fit really well with this team. We can question the price and we can question if they were going to pay that much. Was Bane the best guy to do it? But yeah, I mean, Orlando got a guy that they needed, and Memphis kind of reset. This core wasn't really going anywhere. They won one playoff series in what, 4 years? So we'll see what Memphis has in store. But I like the deal for Memphis with all the draft picks that they were able to get back.
Yeah, I mean, I think what they expected KCP to be is what they probably get in Bane, hopefully. Like KCP was supposed to be their offensive guy. Obviously, he was very successful in Denver, with Jokic. Maybe that was the reason why he was so successful. But like, Bane is a good player, right? Like him and Ja were their offensive pieces. Obviously Ja wasn't as good this season, but Bane was still out there hooping. So I definitely think it was a bit of an overpay, especially with, like you mentioned, either the Suns or the Wizards pick, who are both gonna probably be pretty bad. But I mean, I don't really understand. Do they really have to win now? You have pretty like young pieces. You have Paolo, Franz, and Suggs. Is this really a move you need to make right now? I don't know. Maybe it's a matter of the ownership pressuring the front office to try to make a move. I think it's a like I wouldn't have made this trade, but I understand why they did it, right? Obviously, like they're a very defensive team, but they needed one offensive piece to try to make stuff moving, right? Like you can't just score with defense. So I understand why they did it. I don't really agree with the amount of stuff that they gave up, but I mean, very interesting trade. I think this entire offseason is going to be very interesting, and this is just the first step in going into that.
Yeah, I think what Orlando was seeing was kind of what we talked about the last couple episodes, which is the landscape of the East next year
Mhm.
looks very weak with Milwaukee and Boston kind of in flux. So Orlando, I think they're just saying, we have this core probably would have been better than a play-in team last year if Paolo and Franz Wagner didn't suffer injuries. So let's kind of go see if we can do something, make some noise with Bane. Um, it is interesting. Orlando does not have a true point guard. Jalen Suggs, I feel like he's more of an off guard. The
Yeah,
defensive anchor on the
agreed.
perimeter, and Bane definitely not a lead ball handler. Although he made strides this year,
Mhm.
he is prone to some turnovers when he's more of a high volume ball handler. But Orlando's comfortable with Paolo and Franz handling the ball a lot more than you would expect from these big wings. I think this will be a fun sort of team to take a look at if these guys can stay healthy. They might make some noise. I'll probably put them around top four in the East with this trade, along with New York, Cleveland, and Indiana. But they have to go on the court and prove it to us that they're ready to make that leap.
Yeah, I agree. I think they definitely try to get a point guard in free agency. There's a lot of interesting options this year. Obviously, we'll see how it shakes up where teams resign their players, but yeah, I definitely think they do need that one ball handler to really get their offensive motion. You have pretty impactful pieces, right? You have like Paolo can get to a spot. Wagner is pretty good. Suggs can do his thing, but yeah, I mean their offense was just kind of clunky last year. It was kind of hard to watch. I think with Bane and maybe some free agency signings, they could definitely be top four, like you mentioned.
Yep. So the reason we bring up this Bane trade is because there's a bigger trade saga going on in the NBA, and that is Kevin Durant. Durant was chopped at the trade deadline by Phoenix without his knowledge. It fractured the relationship, and now he wants out, and Phoenix is going to work with him on a trade. And from what we know, there's three destinations that he really wants to go to: San Antonio, Houston, and Miami. And then lurking in there is Minnesota, who wants him. He hasn't said he wants to go there, but it would be a interesting fit with him alongside his friend Anthony Edwards. So
Hmm.
what we're basically going to do is I've got some sample trade packages for each of those teams, and we're going to see what we think about those offers and if those teams should make the offers and if KD should want to go there. And also, analyze this from the Phoenix point of view. They want to get the best return possible. Which one should they take? So we'll start with San Antonio. And the obvious allure for KD is playing alongside Victor Wembanyama and De'Aaron Fox with this suddenly ascending San Antonio team. They've also got Stephon Castle, who's the reigning Rookie of the Year. And the trade proposal I have is San Antonio doesn't give up the number 2 pick, nor do they give up Stephon Castle.
Okay.
And the reason for that is I just don't think the market for KD is going to be that high
Mhm.
given his age and the contract. So here's the proposal: Devin Vassell, Harrison Barnes, Jeremy Sohan, a 2026 first round pick, which will be the most favorable of either San Antonio's or Atlanta's pick,
Mhm.
then a 2029 first round pick that is top 5 protected. And if it doesn't convey, then it turns into a couple second rounders. And then a 2027 first round swap that is top 4 protected. So essentially, Devin Vassell, Harrison Barnes, Jeremy Sohan, 2 first rounders and a first round swap.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably like the best package the Spurs can do without giving up their key players. I know they were kind of iffy on trading Sohan. Obviously he's not that great of a player compared to KD, but he's an important part of their team. I definitely think that's interesting. In 2029, they're probably going to be a very good team, so that pick probably isn't going to be that valuable, probably in the 20s. Yeah, I mean that's probably a very good trade for the Spurs. The question is, do they really want to get that much older? You know, they're a very young core right now. Do they keep going with that, or do they trade some of their young pieces away for KD, who's already what, like
I believe he's
35?
36,
Yeah,
37, something like
it's an
that.
old guy, right? He's probably only going to play for a few more years. Yeah, definitely an interesting trade concept. Like, I think it could be very helpful to Spurs if they want to really win now. And I mean, that's a piece to get, right? And those picks don't like hobble them very much, right? They still have a lot of other options moving forward. For the Suns, I mean, that's probably like the haul you want to get. You got some major key like young players that you can try to develop. The picks aren't like the greatest there, but I think like you mentioned with Katie being very old, like you're not gonna have the best sort of market. You're only gonna have the teams that really want to win now or give their guys experience in the playoffs. And that's not many teams that don't already have a piece that's like Katie. So I definitely think that's a really interesting offer.
Yep. And this offer definitely doesn't have the quality of players coming back. I mean, Devin Vassell is a solid player, but he's not
Mhm.
really a high upside guy. Doesn't It feels like he's kind of reached his
Yeah.
close to his ceiling. If I was San Antonio, I probably wouldn't go for KD if I'm being honest.
Mhm.
You've got the assets to be able to make a swing at Giannis Antetokounmpo if you want
Yeah.
to. Um, but there's no rush for San Antonio. Obviously, building around Wemby on a rookie contract is a great idea. They've got the number 2 pick in this draft. They got Castle, they got Fox and Wemby and Keldon Johnson and all these guys. KD is not the guy I would go for if I were them. I would go for someone who's more aligned with Wemby's timeline, but this is definitely one of the options they have. So moving on, the next offer is from Houston. So this offer is going to be revolving around Jalen Green, who former number 2 pick, uh, had some great moments throughout the last 4 years, but really poor playoff performance.
Mhm.
So Houston ships him out along with Jabari Smith Jr., Jock Landale, and a 2027 pick, first round pick that was originally Phoenix's pick. So Phoenix
Yeah.
gets back their first rounder in 2027. So not that much draft assets, but that 2027 pick is very valuable for Phoenix, disproportionately to the rest of the league. And they get a couple young players in Green and Smith. So what do you think about this one?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of a return for Phoenix is probably the best you can get. I was looking at that 2027 pick. Obviously, you want to control your own destiny, right? They gave a lot of their picks out to get KD, and they probably want to start recuperating some of those picks back. I mean, you're losing Jabari Smith, who I think we both agree is a very good player, and he can become a star moving forward. But obviously, if the Rockets want to win now, they were the second seed last year. It might make sense for them to trade out KD. I mean, Jalen Green was just doing stinker after stinker last year in the playoffs. Um, and yeah, I mean, with their major players with Katie, I mean, you still have Van Vliet, you still have Brooks, you still have Amen Thompson, who's very good. Yeah, I mean, it would be a very interesting team. You're not losing much, right? Like obviously, Jalen Green is a very good scoring option, but Katie replaces that, and then Jabari Smith. I mean, I think both of us once again agree that they weren't probably using him correctly in
Yep.
terms of like his usage, but yeah, I think this is probably as close of a win-win that you get to for both teams. Rockets get their guy, and Phoenix starts trying to move towards that rebuild.
Yeah, I think this is the best deal for Phoenix. And we'll talk about the Miami and Minnesota deals later. But for Houston, essentially, you're just swapping out Jalen Green for Kevin Durant in your starting lineup. And then you lose the key depth piece that is Jabari Smith Jr. But you're looking at a much bigger starting lineup. I'm expecting them to probably decline Fred VanVleet's team option and re-sign
Mhm.
him to a better contract that makes less money than the 45 million he's due on that option.
Yeah.
So you would have him and Dylan Brooks in the backcourt, very big backcourt. And then on the wings, you have Amen Thompson and Kevin Durant, and then Alperen Sengun at center with some good depth pieces like Tari Eason and Reed Shepard and Steven Adams, who just got re-signed. Um, Definitely, you lose some depth with Smith. I really like Smith, but they clearly don't really feel committed in Houston to try and help him reach his ceiling. Um, I've never been a huge fan of Jalen Green, but I'm also not a huge fan of young teams gutting their assets to get an aging star like Kevin Durant. But in this scenario, they only give up one first round pick, and they likely re-sign Durant to whatever extension he wants. And I mean, the time is now for Houston to try and make a push. They were ahead of schedule this year. So yeah, this is probably the best offer for Phoenix, although maybe it might be a bit of an overpay for Houston.
Mhm.
Moving on to what I think is probably the weakest offer of this group, the Miami Heat. Uh, I'm going to be honest, I have no idea why Kevin Durant wants to go to Miami. They won 37 games this past year amid the whole Jimmy Butler saga, and they were swept in the first round by Cleveland. But one of the packages I had for Miami was Andrew Wiggins, Terry Rozier, 2025 first round pick, which is number 20 overall, and then the 2029 Heat first round pick with the top three protection. Uh, Again, doesn't sound like very much. The Heat don't have many assets to give up. They've got some young players, but to make the money work, this is probably the best deal. So I assume you don't like this deal just like I don't, but want to
Yeah,
hear your
I
take.
mean, unless like Katie has like a baby mom in Miami, like I don't know why he wants to go there. And then I don't know why the Suns would want to ship in there with the weakness of their assets. Yeah, I mean, this isn't like a trade that's good for either side. This is like a lose-lose, right? The Heat, I mean, even if they get KD, they're not going to be good, right?
Yep,
Like KD is, maybe if it was 5 years earlier, that would be very good. But this is like just yeah, like you said, I don't understand why he wants to go there. I don't understand why they want him. They should just try to rebuild, right?
yep.
So yeah, definitely one of the trade offers of all time.
Yeah, so um, I feel like Miami is probably out of the running, but they're always going to try and get a star.
Yeah.
The wild card here is Minnesota, who tried to get Durant at the trade deadline this past season. They pushed for it, could not make it happen. Anthony Edwards and Kevin Durant are good friends. Timberwolves could definitely use an upgrade at the second star position
Mm.
where Julius Randle was inconsistent this year. So this offer is Julius Randle opting into his $31 million player option, and he's sent to Phoenix alongside Dante DiVincenzo, Mike Conley, and the Timberwolves first round pick in 2025. Again, not a great offer. Minnesota doesn't want to give up Jaden McDaniels in the trade, and they don't have many draft picks left after giving a bunch of them up for Rudy Gobert. So again, not a great offer, but what do you think about this one?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Mike Conley is also a big part of their like team culture and their locker room as well. Do they want to ship him? I mean, if you can get KD, you probably just have to do that trade. But I think the biggest thing is like, does KD actually want to go there and work alongside Ant? I don't really know what sort of headspace he's in right now. Like, does he think that he can be a star anymore, or has he accepted that he's probably not going to be that star? He's probably going to be a very good second option. So I think Randall was inconsistent, and in my opinion, he's just not the caliber of a star player or a second option that you want. He can be very good sometimes, but just because of his inconsistency, he's just not the player you want. So if Minnesota can do that, obviously they lose their perimeter defense and a very good defender in Jaden McDaniels. But I think if they can find a way to do it, you probably just do it. Uh, but then again, like they just made a deep run into the playoffs. Do you really want to change this team? I think it's just Julius Randle is not a good player. If they really feel like they don't want him, then they do this trade. But once again, all hinges on KD because he has shown that he doesn't really want to go there.
Yeah, I mean, Minnesota's made it to back-to-back Western Conference Finals, but both times they've lost in 5 games, and the
Mhm.
series haven't been necessarily that close. If I'm breaking these four teams down, if I'm KD, the place I want to go is San Antonio.
Yeah.
If I'm Phoenix, the place I want to trade him is Houston because they own our first round pick in
Oh,
2027. If I'm Miami, I want to desperately get him because at least with Houston and San Antonio, you've got, young players that can grow and you're an ascending team. Miami is a declining team.
Yeah.
They don't really have much that's like going for them besides getting a star like KD. And then Minnesota, it's really just about keeping Anthony Edwards happy, trying to build on these runs that they've had the last 2 years. But yeah, I like the Houston offer. San Antonio's offer is second. These Miami and Minnesota just don't have the assets to compete with San Antonio and Houston. So
Yeah, I definitely think the Rockets offer is probably the best middle ground between the two. KD gets to play on a very solid team while Phoenix gets those assets back. Like you mentioned, the Spurs are a very good place for KD to go, but they're probably not going to give that good of a return to the Suns, especially since they don't have the Suns' first round pick. And then yeah, I mean the Heat and the Wolves are just. I mean, they're like way in the distance, right? I definitely think it's
yep,
going to be between those two teams. I definitely think it's going to be very interesting how the league shakes up when Trady gets traded.
yep. One of the superstars of this generation, no doubt, but it's
Yeah.
a very intriguing saga here. But yeah, that's going to cap off our NBA coverage for this episode, and we're going to dive into some more football stuff. Our NFL division previews for 2025. Last week we covered the NFC East, headlined by the reigning champion Philadelphia Eagles. But this week we're going to dive into what I think is the best division in football, which is the NFC North. And we're going to start with the Detroit Lions, who just won their second straight NFC North title. They went 15-2
Mhm.
but lost in the divisional round to Jaden Daniels and the Washington Commanders. And this offseason, Detroit lost both their coordinators, Ben Johnson, who became the head coach of the Chicago Bears, and Aaron Glenn, who became the head coach of the New York Jets. So that's going to be an interesting storyline to monitor as the season goes on. They will get back a bunch of guys defensively who were injured last year, most notably Aiden Hutchinson. So there's definitely room for improvement for Detroit, which is crazy because they won 15 games last year.
Mhm.
But yeah, what do you think about Detroit in 2025?
Yeah, I mean their offense didn't change much. They lost Frank Ragnow, obviously a very important part of their offensive line. But I mean, besides that, like their offense looks basically identical to last year. You still have, Jahmyr Gibbs and Montgomery two-headed dragon, very good in the running offense. You still have Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams as receiving options, and then also Sam Laporta, who wasn't as good last season, but still a very good option. Looking at their defense, I think, like you mentioned, Aiden Hutchinson is a very big question mark. He had a pretty gnarly injury last year. Is he really going to come back to form? But even without him, they went 15-2, right? So like,
Yep.
if he can even come back to like 75% at the starting of the season, that's a very good that's a very good addition to their defense. Like you mentioned, once again, they lost both of their coordinators. How much of their success was actually because of them versus Dan Campbell, obviously a very fiery guy, gets the team interested, but we'll see how the offensive and defensive scheme really switches with these new coordinators. They have a very difficult schedule, right? First place schedule and in the NFC North. I mean, this is just game after game. We have Green Bay, Chicago, Baltimore. That's a three-game stretch in the beginning of the season. That's very difficult. You have Cleveland, whatever. Then you have Cincinnati, you have the Chiefs, you have the Buccaneers, and then I mean it's just like the only weak games on their schedule are Cleveland, the Giants, maybe Dallas, and maybe the Steelers.
Yeah.
That's four games that they can like look forward to really winning. Everything else is going to be a toss up in my opinion.
Yep. It's a brutal schedule for sure. And we do this whole indoor outdoor thing with Detroit every year because of Jared Goff and his crazy splits when they're
Yeah.
indoors versus outdoors. And last year, Detroit played 14 of its 17 games indoors. Um, People say, the theory was debunked because Detroit went 3-0 outdoors at Chicago, at San Francisco, at Green Bay. They won those three
Mhm.
games. This year, a lot more outdoor games for Detroit at Green Bay, at Baltimore, at Cincinnati, at Kansas City, at Washington, at Philadelphia. So 6 games outdoors. Because every single game they play at home is indoors, plus at Minnesota and at Chicago. So we'll see if that's a thing. I don't know if it's a huge thing anymore because of how they've been able to establish this run game
Yeah.
in colder weather. But it is definitely something to monitor with this schedule. They had a first place schedule last year, but they didn't have to play the AFC North last year.
Uh-huh.
So And then they've also got to play Kansas City week 6 on Sunday Night Football. That'll be a fun game. Um, I mean, Detroit's a great team. Uh, the question for them is, can they get over the hump and get to the Super Bowl and win the Super Bowl? And is it possible to do that with Goff? That's going to be something we're going to need to see if they can answer that question this year.
Yeah, I mean, I'll continue like what I did last week for the biggest question for each team. I think is Jared Goff really enough to take them to the promised land? I think this division is the division of QB question marks, which we'll talk about a bit moving forward as well. But Jared Goff I mean, he was extremely solid, right? He was there to be a game manager and to maybe try to be clutch in the moments, but at their core, they were a heavy running team trying to really get the ball in Jahmyr Gibbs' hands. There was second in passing yards because of their very good options, sixth in rushing yards, so their offense was very efficient. Um, I mean, Jared Goff is not a bad player, but is he enough to, obviously they lost to the Commanders last year. Is he enough to, if he's in that situation again, to really get them over that hump and get them that win?
Yeah, three interceptions in that playoff game. I've been a critic of Goff throughout his career just because I don't think he's the type of quarterback who can elevate his surroundings, but
Mhm.
he's been great for 3 straight years with Detroit. But the playoff hump is going to be important to see if he can get over it. Um, Last really quick thing, you mentioned Frank Ragnow earlier. That's a big story in my opinion because they
Yeah.
also lost right guard Kevin Zeitler in free
Mhm.
agency. So, rock solid on the edges with Taylor Decker and Penei Sewell, but the interior of the offensive line feels pretty important, especially for a quarterback in Goff who's not the greatest scrambler. They like running up the middle with Montgomery. Uh, and the offensive line has been the heartbeat of this offense for, the Ben Johnson era. So as they move to the next offensive coordinator, we need to see if that offensive line can hold up the same way.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, talking about offensive lines, one team that had a major offensive line makeover this offseason was the Minnesota Vikings, who brought in 3 new starters on their offensive line with center Ryan Kelly, right guard Will Fries, and first round pick Donovan Jackson at left guard. And all of that is to protect a new quarterback, JJ McCarthy, who was the 10th pick last year, didn't play due to a meniscus injury, and watched Sam Darnold take his team to a 14-win season and then a humiliating wildcard loss. McCarthy is undoubtedly, the X factor for this Vikings team, who pretty much improved across the board in the offseason with, like I said, the additions on the offensive line. They also added Javon Hargrave and Jonathan Allen to their defensive line. They got some questions in the secondary, but this is a team that won 14 games last year, and I think they got better on the margins. But it's all going to come down to McCarthy this upcoming season if he can at least replicate what Darnold did last year.
Yeah, I mean, you have extremely good receiving options. Once again, just like the Lions, like you have a very good system in place. I think this year is going to really show us if Darnold is as good as he was touted to be, because he's going to be in Seattle, and then JJ McCarthy is going to take his place. I think if McCarthy can just really just put his head down and just make the smart decisions, he has a lot of good receiving options. I think he can be a good piece for the Vikings. Kevin O'Connell is a very good coach. I think if JJ McCarthy can be average, then Kevin O'Connell can take him all the way. They still have a very solid defense, Harrison Smith, and their major pieces, like you mentioned. Um, they also have an extremely difficult schedule, just like the Lions, just with the fact of being in the NFC North. I personally think they're going to be a little bit worse than last year. I think Darnold, with all his flaws, was still a experienced quarterback who had some time under his belt, and JJ McCarthy is essentially a rookie, right? Like he didn't get any playing time last year, so I like your opinion on that. Do you think they're going to be as good as last year, or do you think they're going to regress a bit?
I just think purely based on some of the luck they got that it's like it's natural to expect regression.
Uh,
Defensively, they kind of swarmed teams early in the season. They started 5-0, then they lost 2 games back to back against Detroit and then against LA, and then ripped off like 9 straight wins until the end of the year. The secondary is a quiet concern for me. Right now,
mm,
they're penciled in to have Isaiah Rogers and Mekhi Blackman as their starting corners. A year after, Stephon Gilmore leaves in free agency,
yeah.
um, and Shaquille Griffin and all these guys. But I want to. I want to have cautious optimism about this team because I like Kevin O'Connell and I love what they've got offensively, but I'm worried that this defense is not going to be able to replicate what they did last year. And, in big moments with, game-winning drives needed, can JJ McCarthy come through? We really just don't know. He was a lot more of a game manager at Michigan with a great offensive line and running game under Jim Harbaugh.
Mhm.
So Minnesota's got that. But this is the NFL. It's a whole different game. My favorite kind of under the radar acquisition for Minnesota this offseason was Jordan Mason, running back. They traded a sixth
Mhm.
round pick to acquire him from San Francisco.
Yeah.
Um, Aaron Jones did not really have a reliable backup last year, and so down the stretch of the year, he kind of wore down. But Jordan Mason's going to be able to come in, take 5 to 10 carries a game, and allow Kevin O'Connell to run that running back by committee that he wants to do. That he can keep Aaron Jones fresh for the entire season, so that Jones can be at his best come December and January. So
Mhm.
that's my favorite under the radar acquisition for Minnesota's offseason.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest question for them is JJ McCarthy. I mean, I don't think they've regressed in many other places, but that QB spot is just a big, big question mark. And I think that as long as he's somewhat average, they can maybe set up the run game. Obviously, last year they weren't that good. They were tied 19th in rushing yards, but their defense was their strong suit, right? Like fifth in points against. Um, and they had a very good passing attack. So if they can somehow replicate that, I still think they're going to have success. But it's all a matter of JJ McCarthy. He's both a rookie and coming off an injury. I think it might be a bit difficult, especially in in the first few weeks. But once he gets his stride, we might see them go on a bit of a run.
Yeah, so Minnesota definitely one of the more interesting teams in the league with the, super successful season last year, but then the quarterback change almost, you just never see that. But
Mhm.
um, yeah, so moving on to the next team, the Chicago Bears, who were kind of the offseason winners
Yeah.
this time around, bringing in the biggest fish in the pond, Ben Johnson, to become the new head coach, to guide Caleb Williams to try to get his full potential. And they surrounded Caleb Williams with a lot of stuff this offseason. First in free agency, remaking the offensive line, trading for Joe Tooney from Kansas City and Jonah Jackson from the Los Angeles Rams to shore up their guard positions. And they signed Drew Dahlman in free agency to be their new center. So interior offensive line secured. They also spent the 10th pick on tight end Colston Loveland, who's drawing comparisons to Sam Laporta. So you can see that connection from Ben Johnson. And then spent a second round pick on wide receiver Luther Burden III, a yak monster who replaces Keenan Allen as that slot receiver. Also, some additions defensively, Grady Jarrett and Dio Odengbo trying to get some depth to his defense, which kind of regressed last year after a strong 2023. Um, to me, I feel like it's easy to say this for every team, but it comes down to Caleb Williams.
Yeah.
He had a disappointing rookie year, even though he wasn't that bad. It was just the expectations were so high, and he was the number one pick, and touted as the next Aaron Rodgers or the next Patrick Mahomes, and he didn't look like it as a rookie. But Ben Johnson, known as a QB guru, they've surrounded him with a bunch of options. We'll see if he can make that year two leap that we see a lot of quarterbacks make.
Yeah, I mean, given that the fact they were 5-12 last year, I think the only way to go is up. They were 31st in passing yards last year. Obviously, Ben Johnson is a very good coordinator. I think he can definitely make the team better in terms of the offense and probably also the defense. Just with the fact that the offense will play better, the defense will have to be on the field less. Like you mentioned, I mean, I think they have a very good young offense, especially that offensive line is probably, top five or top three in football right now. They have very strong pieces. Then they also have some solid defensive pieces still. Probably not as good as, the Bears of yonder back in the 2010s, but still very good pieces that, especially if this offense can do its thing, then the defense is going to have a very good time. I think in terms of their schedule, they have a fourth place schedule, but it's still very, very hard. Once again, just the fact of being in the NFC North, you have to play 6 games against very good teams, especially as the Bears. Um, yeah, I mean, their schedule just isn't very good. I mean, I think they're going to be better than 5 wins, but I just don't know if they're going to really reach that 10-win mark with how difficult their schedule is.
Yeah, they're a tough team to grasp because you could make the argument for a lot of their games last year that, just with competent head coaching, they could have won. I mean, so many one-score games, one score loss to Houston, one score loss to Indianapolis, the infamous Washington Hail Mary game.
Yeah.
Um, 1 point loss to Green Bay, 1 score loss to Minnesota in overtime. You had the Detroit game on Thanksgiving that lost Matt Eberflus's job, and then the 6-3 loss to Seattle, which is, I mean, I was watching the final few minutes of that game. It was brutal.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, just based on having more stable coaching, they could be able to, they could have been like a 7 or 8 win team last year. But Ben Johnson has never been a head coach before, so
Oh.
we have to see what he's like in the gauntlet, not having Dan Campbell to look up to and make those big decisions.
Hmm.
But yeah, the schedule is difficult. NFC North, and you're playing the AFC North as one of the divisions. Caleb Williams is still unproven, even though he's got the first pick pedigree. It's going to be a very interesting season for Chicago. I really want to see them do well because it's been so long since they've had good quarterback
Yeah.
play. I want to put them in the playoffs, but they're going to have to go out and prove that they're for real. And this offense could be fun, but there also could be some growing pains. Yeah, I mean, just like Minnesota, this is a very enigmatic team, and we're going to see, a couple weeks in what we're looking at with Chicago.
Yeah, I mean, they haven't had a 4,000-yard passer or whatever, right? I think that was
Yeah.
the claim. They obviously just got a Pope, so maybe that'll inspire them to be better. But yeah, I mean, once again, this is the division of QB question marks. Can Caleb Williams really take that next step and solidify himself as a quarterback that Chicago needs? I personally think he can, especially with the improvements, and I think Ben Johnson can be very good, for both his development and just the team in general. And yeah, I think this is a very interesting team. And this division is going to be really, really fun to watch. I don't think like every single week, I think there's going to be at least one game in this division that's going to be very good. That's going to be a must watch.
Yep, I totally agree. This is, like I said, it's the best division in football, and so many fun teams, some great coaches. It's going to be a really great watch. Kind of the team that gets forgotten a bit with the hoopla with the Bears and Vikings this offseason, and the Lions being so steady is the Green Bay Packers, who made their second straight postseason last year, and kind of a quiet offseason for Green Bay. They drafted Matthew Golden in the first round, first wide receiver they've drafted in the first round in forever.
Mhm.
Bring in Aaron Banks on the offensive line. But again, really a quiet offseason to just release Jair Alexander, who was one of their longest tenured players. I don't know how I feel about Green Bay running it back. They lost in the wild card round last year. A lot of their struggles can be possibly attributed to Jordan Love being in and out of the lineup all year.
Yeah.
But there's no doubt that this team has questions on their pass rush if they can get to the quarterback consistently. And now with the loss of Alexander, you got some unproven guys in the secondary. So defensively, I got some questions about this team. Offensively, still no number one wide receiver.
Yeah.
They're going with the whole ensemble casting with Golden and Jaden Reed and Romeo Dobbs. Josh Jacobs handled a heavy workload last year. Can he do it again? And Love, he's got to prove that he's worth the big deal he got, and that his struggles at times last year were due to injury and not due to him hitting some snags in his development. So all of that to say, Green Bay made the playoffs last year and they nearly defeated the Philadelphia Eagles in the wild card round, but they've got to take that next step. This young team's got to grow up because their division has grown up around them.
Yeah, like really big thing that you mentioned, they don't really have a 1A receiver. They have a bunch of good options, but not a great option, right? The Vikings have Justin Jefferson. The Lions have Amon-Ra St. Brown. You most likely need a 1A option who you can just throw the ball to and you can see them succeed. And Green Bay, maybe they can get that with like a Jaden Reed, but obviously he hasn't really shown that he has that ability right now. I think their offensive line is still pretty solid, especially with Aaron Banks. Their defense is fine. I mean, it's nothing special. Yeah, I mean, this is just a very like, I mean, it's a team, right? Like, it's an okay team, but the fact that they're in the NFC North is just a hard division. And I think the fact that they're just okay is probably not going to be enough for them to go all the way. Especially, I mean, they're probably going to snag a wild card once again if they can replicate their success from last year. But I don't think they really have a good chance of getting that number one place in the division.
Yeah, I agree. Their defense was significantly better last year compared to 2023, just
Oh,
based on getting turnovers with new defensive coordinator Jeff Hafley, running a more aggressive system. Xavier McKinney was a huge impact player coming over from New York. But there was no big impact addition this offseason, unless, maybe Nate Hobbs from Vegas can shore up that nickelback position. Um, I mean, the pass rush, again, I mentioned it earlier, but Rashawn Gary is a pretty good pass rusher off the edge, but the other guys, Lucas Van Ness, can he become the guy they drafted him to be? Devontae Wyatt, same thing. Uh, they got a lot of young guys who, have high draft pedigree, but haven't yet hit expectations. Offensively, the wide receiver issue, I think it's a lot bigger than Green Bay wants to admit it is, because third down late in the game, you want to have that security blanket of, I can go to this guy, he's going to get open, like JJ McCarthy has with Justin Jefferson, and like Jared Goff has with Amon-Ra St. Brown. You don't have that guy in Green Bay. They relied a lot on Josh Jacobs last year, and if we know anything about running backs on their second contracts, big seasons aren't often replicated back to back unless you're Derrick Henry.
Yeah.
So we'll see. A lot of pressure on Jordan Love. Um, I don't hate, I didn't hate the season Jordan Love had last year. Injuries were definitely a problem for him, and they hit right away in week one. But I couldn't help but notice how uncomfortable he looked in the playoffs against that Eagles defense and the turnovers he had. Um, yeah, he's got to channel that form that he had late in 2023 that got him that big contract because they need him to become the star that he can be to elevate this roster around him. Because I mean, they've got more question marks than any other team in this division, the way I see it.
Yeah, I mean, the big question from me is can their offense keep up with the other high-powered offenses, right? Like the Vikings most likely, and then the Lions and the Bears are all gonna put up big numbers on your defense most likely. Can you replicate the same on their defense as well? That's a big question. Obviously, they have Matt LaFleur, very good head coach. He's been there for a few years and he's had success in every single year. But yeah, this is just a questionable team. Can they really take that step? Is Jordan Love actually the quarterback of the future? Yeah, this division is just, it's too good for all these four teams to be in the same division. It's just all very hard to rank everyone.
I totally agree. Yeah, and just based on the strength of the division, it's hard to imagine all four of these teams making the playoffs just because it feels like one team is going to be the odd man out, go
Yeah.
9-8 and miss the playoffs, especially with teams like the Commanders and the Rams or the 49ers, whichever one of those teams doesn't win the division. And then maybe some sneaky teams in the NFC South that we'll talk about next week. So if I had to rank this team, I love Matt LaFleur, I love Jordan Love, but I had to put the Packers last.
Mhm.
They don't have the star power to make me feel like they can overcome some of the faults they've got. Um, at second, I would take Minnesota. Um, again, I like Minnesota. I like Kevin O'Connell. It's just the quarterback thing. We've never seen any sort of grandeur from JJ McCarthy.
Mhm.
He's shown he can manage a system at the college level. Um, but he's probably going to need to do at least that and possibly more at the NFL level, which is just much harder. And Sam Darnold had a great year. It's easy to forget how good he was based on how the season ended, but it's hard to replicate, 35 touchdowns and how many ever passing yards Darnold had. And I don't really know if McCarthy is going to be capable of that. Although, you'd be a fool to doubt Kevin O'Connell. I just think the ceiling isn't quite there for McCarthy in year one as a starter. So I'll take Minnesota third. As you can tell, I'm high on this Bears team. I'm taking them second. I just feel like that second year leap is going to come through for Caleb Williams, and I like the additions they made offensively. This could be a really fun team with these trick plays and Fed Johnson. They brought in Dennis Allen to be their defensive coordinator. They've got some great pieces with Jalen Johnson and Jaquan Brisker and Kyler Gordon, Tremaine Edmonds. A lot of players on this defense. They can hopefully get back to that standard that they set in 2022 or 2023, one of those two seasons when they made that trade for Montez Sweat and the defense just took off. And it would be great if the offense could help the defense out a little bit because they got no help last year.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would take the Bears second. And then, yeah, the Lions. I mean, the roster is just so good. It would be hard to pick against this team to win it, win the division that is. But yeah, I mean, there will be regression for all of these teams except for the Bears because you can't regress worse than they were last year.
Uh,
But yeah, I mean, I think 13 wins is going to be necessary to win this division at the very least, possibly 14. And I think three of these teams are going to make the playoffs, and so that rules the Packers out. Sorry, Packers.
yeah, I kind of like going off of what you said, I think the Lions are still going to be number one. I still think they're going to, hover around that 13 to 15 win mark. Personally, I still have the Vikings number two. I just think that their success with Darnold, even if they might regress a bit with McCarthy, I still think they're going to be good. I have the Bears at a very close number three. I can see them definitely going to number two. With, if their success in the first 3 weeks is very good, like, they could easily overtake the Vikings. And then, yeah, Packers, just the fact that they're average on so many fronts, and the NFC North is so crowded, and the NFC itself is very crowded. I just don't see them. Even if they win 10 games, they might just not make the wild card with how good the rest of the division is and the rest of the NFC. Yeah, so I think the only thing we disagree on is second and third, but I could see that swapping any day. With if they make any additions or any sort of changes, or we just see them play, I think that could definitely switch.
Yep. Yeah, to be clear, I mean, I still think the Packers and Lions will be pretty close. Just because I have the Packers last, doesn't necessarily mean they're significantly worse.
Yeah.
I could definitely see, Lions winning like 13 games and the Bears winning like 11 or 10. The Vikings also winning 10 and the Packers also winning 10. I just feel like Detroit is a bit higher than the rest of these three teams, but the rest of them are really, really similar in terms of their talent and the quality of play that they can show in this season. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see kind of the playoff race, especially when you look at their schedules down the stretch and the divisional matchups they've got. They're going to be so big. Some of the big ones, Chicago and Green Bay in Week 16.
Mhm.
They also play in Week 14. The Packers also play Detroit Week 13 and Minnesota Week 12, and then Minnesota in the last week of the season. So for
Yeah.
the Packers specifically, they've got a bit of a gauntlet down the stretch because then you consider the two games that we skipped in there are at Denver and then against Baltimore. Um, yeah, the schedules are really brutal for this division. The teams are really good. I think talent will rise up, and we'll see ultimately our predictions will come pretty close to fruition. I feel good about all these teams, but yeah, this is going to be such a fun division to monitor throughout the year. So much young talent and new faces and excellence across the board.
Yeah, I think that's everything from my part. Thank you everyone for listening to us yap for like an hour. We really appreciate it. Once again, leave comments, share this with your friends, let us know what else you want to talk about. Adarsh, you can tell them what we have planned for next week.
Yeah, absolutely. So next week we'll have a pretty late but exciting review of whatever happens in Game 7 of the finals. I wish we could do it earlier, so we'll discuss that possibly a little mini episode again, just reviewing Game 7.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, we've got a lot of stuff in store for next week, including our NFC South preview, which probably the weaker division in the NFC. So the Saints, the Buccaneers, the Panthers, and the Atlanta Falcons will be the focus of our NFL segment. We'll also touch on a pretty interesting topic, which is pretty relevant now with the scrutiny around the Oklahoma City Thunder, which is how to fix the NBA, specifically the foul calls and the way that the game is officiated. We know the ratings have not been great in recent years. So we want to talk about what we would do as the commissioner of the NBA to get that product back up to its heights that we saw in the 2010s. So yeah, that's going to be pretty much our topics for next week, and that's going to wrap it up for episode 3 of Mont Moments. Yeah, thank you everybody for watching, and we'll catch you next week.